Welcome to Washington Hospital Today, the program dedicated to sharing timely information about the community hospital that's been taking care of Washington Township Healthcare District residents since it opened in 1958. Washington Hospital Today is provided for the sole purpose of informing residents about healthcare topics and issues that have been covered during community forums, free health and wellness classes, or as part of educational sessions held during the district's open board meetings. This program is one more way that Washington Hospital helps empower you, the residents of the district, by providing information needed to make informed decisions about your health.
Today's presenter is Lorie Roffelsen. Lorie Roffelsen is a registered dietitian at the Washington Hospital Healthcare System. Lorie completed her studies at San Francisco State University. She is a prominent speaker for Washington Hospital's community outreach educational programs.
Well, welcome for those of you who are regulars for Diabetes Matters and for those that are new. The topic tonight is reading food labels, which is a skill that we all need to practice, and at the grocery store it can sometimes add a lot of time to your shopping experience if you are not sure which product to choose when you have a variety there to choose from. So we're going to talk about reading food labels, and there's a couple new updates that I'm also going to share with you. The reason we want to look at food labels when we have diabetes is there are foods that, of course, have an effect on our blood sugars. There's 3 areas in our life that we can control and manage to help us with our diabetes control. Food is one of them. So we're going to talk tonight about food, and these areas all work together. So the better you are with making good food choices, it can maybe affect or decrease the amount of medication you might need. Exercise can have that same benefit as well. So there's 3 major nutrients in foods that we eat that give us energy. And the 3 major ones are fats, protein, and carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the energy nutrient we're going to focus on probably the most tonight, because foods that are rich in carbohydrate have the most effect on your blood sugar. So here's some facts about carbohydrate. They raise your blood glucose levels more than other energy nutrients, but they are a necessary part of the diet, so you don't want to avoid carbohydrate. They are the preferred fuel for the brain, and very low carbohydrate diets are not recommended. And not all carbohydrates are created equal. So we're going to talk tonight about quality of some carbohydrates and how we should include more of those. So carbohydrate is kind of a broad term. There's different types of carbohydrate. We have sugar, starches, even vegetables, non-starchy vegetables have some carbohydrate in them, although these types of foods have less of an effect on your blood sugar. And then we also have fiber, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these. So sugar we can break down actually into 2 types of sugars. We have naturally occurring sugars, which are in fruit. Milk has lactose, which is a sugar, yogurt, and fruit juice. So those are naturally occurring. And then we also have added sugars in the diet. So these are sugars that are added during processing. So these are generally manufactured foods. So sweetened drinks like soda, energy drinks, candy, table sugar, syrup, jam, fruit. If it's canned and heavy syrup, you have the natural sugar there from the fruit plus the added sugar from the syrup. And then baked goods, like the sugar added in a cookie, would also be an example. Starch, which has also had the term complex carbohydrates, if you've heard that term, would be found in starchy vegetables like peas and corn, lima beans, potatoes, winter squash. These starchy vegetables have more of an effect on your blood sugar than those non-starchy vegetables like broccoli, leafy greens, green beans, etc. Then starch is also found in dried beans, peas, and lentils. So all varieties of these type of beans, pinto beans, garbanzo beans, kidney beans, black-eyed peas, and split peas are all starchy. Then grains, whether they're whole grain or refined. And the main ones we probably see in the United States are like oats, rice, barley, and wheat. And these are used to make pastas and breads and crackers, tortillas, etc. Some are in cereals also. Then we also have fiber. Now fiber comes only from plant foods, so you won't find fiber in animal protein. And it's the indigestible part of the plant food. You'll find fiber in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and legumes. So most dietary fiber passes through the intestines not digested, so it's not going to get converted to glucose or affect the blood sugar. Now the recommended amount per day is try to aim for about 25 to 30 grams of fiber each day. So if you're looking at a food label, let's say a bread product, if it has 5 grams of fiber or more per serving, that would be considered an excellent source of fiber. And a good source of fiber would have somewhere between 2.5 and 4.9 grams of fiber per serving. So you'll find that in some, I think I have an example later, a tortilla, which actually has, I think, 9 grams of fiber. So that would be an excellent source. Now, when we're looking at bread products or crackers, etc., try to go more for the whole grains. So a whole grain has the entire intact grain. It's got the outside bran, which is the hard shell or hull on the grain. It contains B vitamins and fiber. There's also the germ part of the grain, which has essential fatty acids and vitamin E. And then the very center of the grain has the endosperm, which is kind of the soft, starchy part. And that's what is used in bread products, etc. But if you go for whole grains, it hasn't been stripped of all those nutrients. And you really want products that still have the bran and the germ intact. Because processed or refined grains can have the B vitamins and some of those nutrients added back, but there's some nutrients in the whole grain that will not be replaced in a processed grain. So on products, look for terms like 100% whole wheat or whole barley, whole grain rye, etc. So you get the benefits of the whole grain. The goal should be to make at least half your daily grain servings whole grain. Now this chart has an example of different grains, and I kind of put this together to compare, and these are all the same serving size. This is all based on 1 cup of cooked bulgur or rice or oatmeal. And you can see the calories, the amount of carbohydrate in each cup. So I kind of rank them. Near the top are choices that are higher in fiber and also higher in protein. And at the bottom, we have products like short grain white rice and long grain white rice, which have a lot of carbohydrate and very little dietary fiber and not really that much protein, compared to something like quinoa, which has been kind of become a little bit more popular. Quinoa is actually a seed, not a grain, but it has 5 grams of dietary fiber per cup, and it has 8 grams of protein, which is a good source of protein. So products like that have less of an effect on your blood sugar because it's the percentage of carbohydrate and fiber and protein is higher. So those are things to consider when you're choosing your grains. I wanted to show you the difference between brown rice and the white rice. So a cup of brown rice has about 45 grams carbohydrate and 3.5 grams of dietary fiber, compared to, again, like I was showing you at the bottom, the white rice has really no fiber. And especially the short grain white rice has even more carbohydrate. Now I want to talk a little bit about steps to carbohydrate counting, because you can use food labels to help you with your carb counting. The first step really is you have to learn and know what foods contain carbohydrate. So we're kind of learning about that tonight. And learn portions that are considered carb choices. Then you put that information together and try to practice a sensible meal plan and try to be consistent day to day with about how much carbohydrate you're eating at meals. And then to get feedback and see if it's working for you, it's good to self-monitor your blood sugars before, after meals to see how the plan is working for you. So blood sugar goals, if you don't have an idea, your doctor may have different numbers for you, but these are numbers that we use in our program. Before meal, anywhere between 70 and 120 is a good fasting or pre-meal blood sugar. And 2 hours after you eat, if you check your blood sugar at that time, it should be less than 180. So carb counting, here's kind of a simple example here. Regular sliced sandwich bread, that's not the wider loaves, but just a regular sandwich-sized loaf. One slice is on average about 15 grams carbohydrate, unless you're getting like the diet bread that's like thinner sliced. But an average slice of bread has about 15 grams. So we call that one carbohydrate choice for bread. So if you have 2 slices of bread, let's say you're making a sandwich, you have there 2 carbohydrate choices. And on average, that's going to be about 30 grams of carbohydrate. So you can do that with bread. You can also do that with other foods. So you might need a reference for these portions, but if you have a cup of milk, that's considered one carb choice. If you have 1 cup of plain yogurt, that's considered one carb choice. For cooked things like cooked rice and cooked pasta, for every third of a cup cooked, you have 1 carbohydrate choice. So if you have a whole cup of rice on your plate, how many carbohydrate choices is that? It would be 3, right? Half of an English muffin would be 1 carbohydrate choice. I don't have bagel up here because there's so many different size bagels. If you get the little mini bagels, those are typically 1 carbohydrate choice. But all the other ones, the toaster size, are probably at least 2. And if you go to a place like Noah's Bagels, it might be 4 carbohydrate choices. So about for every ounce of bread, you have 15 grams of carb or so. And bagels are kind of dense, so that's why. If you have cooked cereal like oatmeal, a half cup cooked cereal or cooked beans would be 1 carbohydrate choice. Generally 1 medium fruit. And you can definitely get references for more specific portions on fruit. And every half cup of juice, which I generally recommend trying to limit or avoid, would be a carbohydrate choice also. So you can find more information about carbohydrates and portions from Diabetic Exchange List. You can look online also at American Diabetes Association website. You can buy carbohydrate counter booklets. You can look on the nutrition facts label for the food that you're maybe interested in. You can learn at our diabetes self-management classes. And there's also a lot of smartphone applications that will help you with carbohydrate counting. So I do get this question, how much carbohydrate should I eat at meals? So the answer is there's no one size fits all for everybody with diabetes. There's a lot of factors, your age, your weight goals, other health issues you might have, and your exercise and activity level kind of all determine how much you should eat. What we usually recommend as a starting point for women is between 30 and 45 grams of carbohydrate at meals, and that would be 2 to 3 carbohydrate choices. And for men, they can have a little bit more, so somewhere between 45 and 60 grams of carbohydrate at meals, which is 3 to 4 carb choices. And again, if that's a starting point for you, monitor your blood sugars before and after you eat and see how that is working for you. You may need some adjustment to your plan. So strategies for including carbohydrate, because we know they do have an effect on your blood sugar. You want to count or somehow keep track of how much you have there, control portions, and try to be consistent day to day. And the reason consistency is important is most people are on specific doses of medication, whether it's pills or insulin, and they take those day to day. If you can be consistent with the amount of carbohydrate you eat day to day, it's easier to help match up your medication to that. If you eat a lot of carbohydrate one day and the next day you eat very little, your blood sugars will probably be up and down and all over the place. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the nutrition facts label and the ingredient label. So on a food product, there's two areas. There's the ingredients, which are listed in order of predominance. So the first food listed is what is most dominant in that product. So in this bread, for example, whole wheat flour is the first ingredient. And listed there will be all the ingredients in the food. You can see if there's added sugars. You can see what type of oil they use. Is it a healthy type of oil? This one, for example, has soybean oil, which would be okay. And then you have the nutrition facts label, which gives information on the portion size, the calories, fat, etc. And now we're going to talk about how to decipher all that information on the label. So if reading food labels is new for you, how many of you kind of practice reading food labels at the store on a regular basis? Okay, most of us do. So where you want to start is the top. You want to look at the serving size, because the serving size is what all this information is going to be based on. So for this particular food, it's macaroni and cheese, and the serving size is 1 cup. And the calories in 1 cup is 250. So if you know you're going to eat 2 cups, then you want to double all this information. So you've actually got 500 calories there, etc. Then the areas usually of concern are here, this yellow area here, which has fat information, saturated fat information, cholesterol, and sodium information. For heart health, we want to try to minimize the numbers in this area. So try to aim for foods that have less saturated fat, less total fat, less cholesterol, and lower amounts of sodium. Now what you can use as kind of a guide is this on the right-hand side, the percent daily value. And the way to use that is it's based on a 2,000 calorie a day plan, which an average man maybe should eat about 2,000 calories. And what the percents mean is for total fat here, for example, this food provides about 18% of the total fat that a person consuming 2,000 calories should have. So that's kind of on the high end just for one food item, because you're going to probably be eating other foods that day. So the way to use percent daily value in general, if it's 5% or less of the daily value for that item, then it's considered low fat or low cholesterol or low sodium. So it would be a good choice in general. So if you want to not even look at these numbers as much and just look at percent daily value and eyeball it, if it's 5% or less, it's pretty, I'd say it's okay in that regard. Anything that's 20% or higher would be considered high in sodium or high in cholesterol, high in fat. So you might want to think twice if you're going to choose that product. If, like for example, if you're really trying to watch your sodium intake, a cup of this mac and cheese has 20% of your sodium intake for the day, or what's recommended for you. So you may want to think twice if you're going to have that. Or it might be something that a food product you don't have very often, if that's the case. Now for people with diabetes meal planning, you want to always use the number for total carbohydrate. If you are carb counting, you're going to look at that number. And so for this mac and cheese, it's got 31 grams carbohydrate. So how many carb choices would that be? It would be 2, right? Now you can also look, you want to try to include foods that have some dietary fiber, if possible. And then of course the protein content is sometimes helpful for some people. What you want to try to get more of are the nutrients at the bottom in blue, the vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. So if those percents there are higher, that's actually good. Those are nutrients we want in the diet. Now an update, this is a proposed new label from the FDA. And it is not, you're not going to see this yet on packages. I haven't seen it yet. But this is the proposed look for the new label. And the idea is that it's cleaner, it's easier to read, or should be easier to read. It lists at the top how many servings in a package of that food. Let's say it's crackers. This food would have 8 servings of crackers per container. And then the serving size that they're basing the information on is also included. So for every 2/3 of a cup of whatever the product is, it has this many calories. And so I guess the idea is to make it easier to understand what you're consuming in that portion size. Then they've moved the percent daily value over to the left side, but that information is still going to be the same. It's still based on 2,000 calories. What's different, they're going to include information on vitamin D, if that product has vitamin D in it, if it has calcium, if it's a source of iron, and also potassium, because those are nutrients we want to try to emphasize or include more in the diet. Also, there's going to be a new line here. So, currently on products, it just says sugars. So you have your total carbohydrate, dietary fiber, and sugars. Well, you don't know, is that sugar, is it naturally occurring in the food, or is it added sugar? So on the new label, it will separate that. It will tell you what is added sugars, so that if you're comparing products, you might want to choose one that has less added sugar or that has no added sugar, if that's what if that's what's important for you. So that, I think, is going to be important for not just people with diabetes, but the general public in general, because there's been this trend in added sugar consumption. So the U.S. annual sugar intake is up to about, on average, 156 pounds per capita, or 22 teaspoons of added sugar per day. And sugar-sweetened beverages make up about 33% of that added sugar in the diet. And what we've found is that trends in added sugar intake parallel obesity and diabetes trends also. And we've also, with more research, seen that there's a lot of health risks that are linked to added sugar consumption. It can increase blood pressure, increase triglycerides, increase fasting glucose levels. It can decrease insulin sensitivity, increase visceral adiposity, so that means weight gain around your abdomen here. And it can also increase inflammation and oxidative stress in the body. So these are all pretty bad things. So when you're looking at food labels, any of these terms would be examples of added sugars. It might just say sugar, could say sugar cane syrup, cane sugar, sucrose, fructose, lactose, glucose, high fructose corn syrup, honey, beet sugar, molasses. There's probably some that I haven't listed here, but these are all examples of, if you're looking at the label, examples of added sugars. Now there's actually recommendations from the American Heart Association now on limiting added sugars in the diet. So for women, it's recommended try to limit to no more than the equivalent of 5 teaspoons per day of added sugars. So that's about 80 calories. And for the average adult man, no more than about 9 teaspoons per day. So that's equivalent to like 144 calories. And so to give you a reference, 1 can of regular cola has about 8 teaspoons of added sugar. So if we're a woman and we're trying to follow these recommendations, we can't even drink a whole can of cola in a day. Now if you see different sugar claims on a label, if it says sugar-free, it means it has less than half a gram of sugar per serving. Reduced sugar means it has at least 25% less sugar than the regular version. And if you see a claim no added sugars or without added sugars, It means no sugar-containing ingredient is added during the processing. So it could have natural sugar in it. Now, this does not apply to sugar alcohols. So sugar alcohols are one of the reduced calorie sweeteners that are used a lot in what are considered diabetic or sugar-free or low-sugar foods. So they're one type of reduced calorie sweetener. You'll see them in ice cream, cookies, pudding, candy, gum, and if it's labeled sugar-free or no sugar added, good chance there's sugar alcohols in it. So on average, you have to know with sugar alcohols, they do have some effect on your blood sugar. They have less calories than regular sugar, so that's why they are used in products. So on average, they provide about half the calories of sugar and other carbohydrates. And even though they're called sugar alcohols, that's just kind of referring to the chemical structure. They do not actually contain alcohol. And some of the popular sugar alcohols used on the market are listed here. You'll see erythritol, glycerol, hydrogenated starch, hydrolysates, isomalt, lactitol, maltitol, mannitol, sorbitol, and mannitol and xylitol. The last three are, I see those quite often in sugar-free gum and sugar-free foods. So there's pros and cons to foods that have sugar alcohols. One of the pros is, it can be used to sweeten foods without adding very many calories at all. So it's used to replace sugar in recipes. And so foods that are made with sugar alcohols may have fewer calories. So that could assist with weight loss or weight management and could also assist with your blood sugar control. The cons are sometimes products that are reduced in sugar are higher in fat or higher in sodium. So you really want to look at the nutrition facts label and see how much fat or how much sodium is added. So check the fat content, and also if you're eating foods with sugar alcohols in them in large amounts, they can have a laxative effect, which might be a good thing if you're constipated, but in general it can cause a lot of GI upset, gas, etc. So that's something if you have a sensitive stomach or kind of sensitive to sugar alcohols, you might avoid them. Another con is products that are made with sugar alcohols. They're more like designer foods. They take more research and development to make, and so they tend to be more expensive than the regular version. So for example, sugar-free cookies might cost more than just regular cookies. So it might make more sense in some cases to just cut back on your portion on a regular version of a food rather than go for the sugar-free version. So keep in mind price, the fat content, the other, overall nutritional value of the sugar-free version versus the regular. Now, here's some tips for carb counting foods with sugar alcohols. It's hard to say how sugar alcohols will affect your blood sugar, so the effect will vary, and even the effect may differ from time to time, depending on when you have that food. But we know because there is less of an effect from sugar alcohols than either sugar, regular sugar, or starch, you can use some of these tips that I'm going to give you on how to estimate how much carbohydrate from a serving to count in your meal plan. So if a food item contains more than 5 grams of sugar alcohols, you can take the amount of sugar alcohols and subtract half of that number from your total amount of carbohydrate, and then count the remaining grams of carbohydrate in your meal plan. So here's an example. Let's say you're looking at a sugar-free candy bar, or maybe it's called a no sugar added candy bar. So one bar has a total of 15 grams carbohydrate, and 6 grams of that are sugar alcohol. So you want to divide the grams of the sugar alcohols in half, so that would be 3, and subtract that number from your total carbohydrate, which is 15. So 15 minus 3 would be 12 grams. Now, for many people, that isn't going to really make a difference in their meal planning. It's a difference of 3 grams carbohydrate. For someone maybe who is on an insulin pump or is adjusting insulin based on specific amounts of carbohydrate, it might be something they want to do. So in addition to sugar alcohols, we also have low-calorie sweeteners on the market, and there's 6 now. They're also called artificial sweeteners, sugar substitutes, or non-nutritive sweeteners. So many foods contain artificial sweeteners, but keep in mind they still may have calories and carbs from other ingredients. So you still want to check the nutrition facts label. And with the exception of aspartame, which has the trade name Equal, they are not broken down by the body, so they pass through the system without being digested and not providing any extra calories. So for that reason, artificial sweeteners do not increase your blood glucose levels like sugar can. So that's the benefit of artificial sweeteners. Now, the ones listed here are all FDA approved. So they've gone through testing and research, and currently there are 6. So we have acesulfame potassium, which I see a lot in diet sodas, and sometimes you'll see more than one of these also in a product, so they sometimes blend them for a certain flavor. Aspartame is another. Saccharin is the oldest one. Sucralose, which is trade name Splenda. Neotame, and there's a new one called Advantame, which is made from aspartame and vanillin, which is an extract of vanilla, and that's a new sugar substitute or artificial sweetener they're using in like sodas and other foods. And so these sweeteners are used to make diet drinks, baked goods, so a lot of them are heat stable, they can be used in baked goods, frozen desserts, candy, light yogurt, chewing gum. There are also tabletop sweeteners for coffee and other beverages, and some have a granular version that can be used in baking, like Splenda, for example. So the trade names you'll see at the store for acesulfame potassium, you'll see Sunnit and Sweet One. For aspartame, you'll see NutraSweet and Equal. Neotame, they don't make a tabletop sweetener. Saccharin, you'll see Sweet and Low, Sweet Twin and Sugar Twin. Sucralose, you'll see Splenda. And for stevia, you'll see there's a few different ones. There's a sweet leaf, Truvia, stevia, sun crystals, and Purevia. And there might even be more now. So stevia is a highly purified extract or product from the stevia plant. And it is several hundred times sweeter than sugar. So only small amounts have to be used to sweeten products. Didn't go through the same testing as those other artificial sweeteners we talked about, but it's just generally recognized as safe by the FDA or has that GRAS label. And it's used as a food additive and tabletop sweetener also. Now, keep in mind with artificial sweeteners, they are not completely carbohydrate and calorie free, some of them. So for example, 1 packet of Splenda has 4 calories and a gram of carbohydrate. Or a packet of Sugar Twin has 3 calories and 1 gram carbohydrate. 1 packet of Equal has 4 calories and 1 gram carbohydrate. Versus a packet of sugar has 11 calories and 3 grams carbohydrate. So these artificial sweeteners in large amounts can actually add up. So you want to keep that in mind if you're using lots of Splenda in your drinks or coffee, etc. The calories and the carb potentially could add up. Now in smaller amounts, they're considered a free food for people with diabetes because they have per serving 5 grams or less of carbohydrate. Now we're going to talk about net carbs. So it's a term that does not actually have a legal definition. It's used by manufacturers. The FDA does not regulate how companies can use the term net carbs on food labels, so this term can be interpreted differently from product to product. And often it's interpreted to make the product look like it's very low carbohydrate. But the American Diabetes Association doesn't recommend using net carbs for meal planning purposes. So consumers should use the nutrition facts label and go with the total carbohydrate on the nutrition facts label for carb counting. That will include all the different kinds of carbohydrate. Your starch, sugar, dietary fiber, sugar alcohols, etc. are in that total carbohydrate number. And that's the number to use in meal planning. Now, there are maybe a small population of people who might benefit from using net carbs. So you can use the following rules if you are on intensive insulin therapy or an insulin pump, or if you're an advanced carbohydrate counter. So if a food has 5 or more grams of dietary fiber per serving, you can subtract half of the grams of fiber from the total grams of carbohydrate in a serving of that food. And then you'd count the remaining grams of carbohydrate toward your meal plan. Same with sugar alcohols. If it has more than 5 grams of sugar alcohols per serving, you can subtract half of the grams of sugar alcohol from the total. When you see products that are labeled net carb, they may have subtracted out sugar alcohols as well as fiber, depending on what the product is. So here's an example. This is a high fiber tortilla that I purchased. And it has 9 grams of fiber per tortilla and 60 calories. So this information is all accurate, except 6 net carbs is what it claims you would be counting or using in your meal planning. So what would be more accurate, according to American Diabetes Association, is to look at your total carbohydrate for the tortilla, which is 15. Now, this product is very high fiber. It's 9 grams of dietary fiber per tortilla. So if you divided that dietary fiber in half, so either you could subtract 4 or you could subtract 5 grams from your total, you would actually have about 10 grams of carbohydrate in that tortilla. That's considered, if you're carb counting, then it would actually be more like 10. But this product is claiming that it's 6 net carbs because it's subtracting out the whole amount of the fiber. And that's probably misleading as far as how much total carbohydrate or what effect it will have on your blood sugar. So it's really kind of underestimating the carbohydrate that's going to probably be, it will affect your blood sugars in the meal plan. So a take-home message: when you're carb counting on food labels, use the total carbohydrate as the number to use in your meal planning. For products with a significant amount of fiber or sugar alcohols, you may be able to subtract a portion from your total carbohydrate. Try to limit or avoid products that are high in added sugars. Look for whole grains and nutritious carbohydrate sources. And always compare products, so compare nutrition fact labels, and you may find the regular version may sometimes be the best choice instead of a sugar-free version. And in that case, if you go with the regular version, just watch your portions and carb count so you can fit it in. So that is my presentation.